as I always say, real quick, real quick. Um, what I want to talk about, I was on my way home after doing a little workout with some athletes and just kind of reflecting. And as I was reflecting, this thought comes to my mind. It's part of the process. Don't become bitter. It's part of the process. There's a lot of things that through the course of life may happen unexpectedly. Some things it may happen as we planned it would happen or how we thought it would happen. But I'm understanding that some things that we go through is just part of the process. And oftentimes it's hard to embrace the process. Sometimes going through the process that is developing your integrity, developing your character, sharpening you, helping you become a better you, whatever the case may be. Sometimes we don't like the process, and oftentimes we can allow within the process we can get to a bitter place. Now, there are some people that are going through the process and they became bitter because they have not embraced the process. They don't like the process, and sometimes going through the process, you're going to be overlooked. Sometimes going through the process, you're going to experience rejection. Going through the process, you're not going to get the support or the backing all the time. And you're going to go through different seasons. Not saying that it always will be like that. It's not always going to be like that, but different seasons of your life, you're going to experience these different things, but it's part of the process. Don't become bitter. Don't become envy. Don't become jealous of what you see others. Because the reality of it is, oftentimes we get bitter in our own process, but we don't know what somebody went through to get to where they are. And sometimes it always looks like the grass is greener on the other side, and really it isn't. Because whether you understand it or not, or whether you processed it or not, we all got to go through a process. And you can't always assume that the process is easy. There were some seasons that's going to be tougher than others. There's some seasons because of what you went through the previous season. This season is not as hard as the season you just experienced or went through. But I want to encourage you to tell you, it's part of the process. Don't become bitter. Don't miss out on the blessings. Don't miss out on the things that you're learning in the process because you allow envy or you allow bitterness to set in. You have the wrong disposition, the wrong attitude because you think this process is too hard. And the reality of it is, listen, you being frustrated, you being bitter ain't gonna help you get through the process any quicker. So listen, it's part of the process. People are going to lie on you. It's part of the process. People are going to overlook you. It's part of the process. And some of the things that you're going through is concerning your process in your life, you can't take it personal. You cannot take it personal. When you start to take things that you're experiencing in your process personal, that can cause you to be bitter. It can cause you to be bitter. The process is never comfortable. It's never comfortable. It's challenging. And I'm talking about your process of life. I'm talking about your process, your journey, whatever your goals, your dreams, your ambitions, whatever you're striving for, you're going to go through a process. And, oftentimes some people don't make it through the process because soon as the process gets challenging, soon as it gets hard, people quit, people give up. And it doesn't mean that a person isn't called or, God didn't choose them or whatever the case is because they gave up. No, they just wasn't mature enough to go through the process. It takes maturity. It takes dedication. It takes sacrifice to go through the process. And once again, the process is not easy. The process is challenging because you're going to go through some lonely seasons. You're going to go through some challenging seasons. You're going to go through some seasons of betrayal. You're going to go through some seasons you thought people was with you and now they're not with you. That is part of the process. Don't become bitter. Learn how to forgive people even in the midst of your process. Forgiving people will help you not to become bitter in the midst of your process. One of the things that we struggle with, and I've experienced it, when somebody disappoints you or somebody betrays you or somebody lies on you or somebody backs out on you or somebody doesn't support you or whatever the case may be, listen, that's part of the process, but don't allow unforgiveness to be the reason why you don't finish the process. See, to finish the process, you got to persevere. You have to persevere. Each and every season, each and every challenge, each and every no. During the process, people are going to tell you no. In the process, people are going to say discouraging things. But that doesn't mean that you're not called. That doesn't mean you won't finish. This is part of the process. And I can't allow somebody telling me no. I can't allow somebody that maybe not supporting me, maybe don't have my back. I can't allow that within my process to stop me from finishing. See, the process is designed, and I'm talking about your life. For those who are jumping on and off, that's cool. The process of your life, the process, the journey that you're going through, listen, that's part of it. The challenges, the ups and downs, you're going to, one moment you could be feeling so good. And then that next moment of your process, you could be like, man, where did this thought come from? Why am I feeling this way? Why all of a sudden now it seemed everything was working for me? Now all of a sudden it seems like everything is not working for me. And the first person we want to blame is God. Oh, God, you forgot about me. Oh, God, this. Oh, God, that. But the reality of it is, no, it's part of the process. Well, I'm so glad that you asked. This what I do a lot of times. I do a lot of ministry stuff, but I'm so glad that you tuned in today. This actual is a inspirational live. I share inspirational things, and what I'm talking about, since you asked, is don't get. It's part of the process. Don't get bitter. Is what I'm talking about. And my focus is trying to encourage people that are going through their process of life. Part of your process of life could be the journey that you're taking, things that your dreams, your ambitions, and things that you want to accomplish. And as you're going through your process, everything ain't gonna work out smooth. Everything is not going to work out the way that you planned it to work out. But don't become bitter in the process. Don't become envy looking at somebody else's process, looking at somebody else's life and thinking that maybe it's not meant for me to do. No, it's meant for you to finish the process. Yes, I'm an apostle, pastor, prophet, all of them. Yes, sir. I'm a little bit of everything. Teacher, a little bit of everything. But I definitely encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I do a lot of encouraging things. I talk about business. I talk about credit. I talk about ministry things. You'll see me go live doing Bible studies and our live worship services. So I encourage you to subscribe. All right. Definitely encourage you to subscribe. So thank you for asking those questions. But that's what I'm talking about on today. Go through the process. And you got to think about it. As you're going through the process, whatever you quit, that's where you got to start from. See, some people think, oh man, I quit, so I got to start over. Not always. It's not always the case. Sometimes when you're going through that process, wherever you stop is where you got to start from. But you have to learn how to persevere. And this is one of the challenging things about going through the process of life, going through the process of achieving goals or whatever you're trying to achieve. You have to learn how to persevere. So even though things become overwhelming, even though things do become challenging or whatever the case is, you can still finish the process. So don't allow life, unexpected things of life. Don't allow this process to overwhelm you to the point where you quit and give up. No, persevere. One of the main things of the process I talked about briefly is my maturity. Sometimes this process is maturing me. Sometimes the process that I'm going through or you're going through is really trying to sharpen you, is really trying to mature you. And the minute that you become bitter, the minute that you become, you want to throw in the towel and give up, you are only hindering your learning process. You're only hindering what you could be, what was really trying to mature you. You're only hindering your growth in this process. And so I want to encourage people that, listen, the process ain't going nowhere. Just because you don't want to finish it right now doesn't mean that your process is going somewhere. No, you got to still finish the process. But understand that these are things that you're going to go through in the midst of your process. And what you have to learn how to do is persevere. You got to learn how to mature. You got to learn how to grow. You got to learn how to forgive. You have to learn how to do these things as you go through the process. Don't become bitter. Don't become envy. Learn how to forgive. Learn how to plow forward. Learn how to move forward. Learn how to progress forward. Learn how to persevere, because guess what? It's part of the process. It's just part of the process. Everybody got a process. And I can't, be focused on somebody else's process so much that I miss what I'm supposed to be learning in my process. All right. You know what? And that's an interesting point. We will experience loss, but even experiencing loss is a learning lesson. I try to encourage people. I'm glad you made that point. I try to encourage people that mistakes are just really teaching me how not to do something. Rather than look at a mistake in a negative way, look at a mistake as far as looking at it from the perspective of, I really learned that this way I tried didn't work. So I really didn't fail. I just learned this way didn't work. But there's a way that does work. And guess what? If we want to focus on mistakes and failure, that is part of the process. But are you growing from your failures? Are you growing from your mistakes? Are you learning that what you're doing isn't working? And are you willing to make a pivot move to do something better? Nothing wrong with making pivot moves in life. Sometimes you got to make a pivot move. We got to do it in business. We got to do it with money. And sometimes you have to do it with life. Sometimes you got to do it with friendships. I got to go a different direction. And you can't be afraid to make pivot moves because guess what? Pivot moves are part of the process. It's the moment that you're not willing to change that hinders your growth and maturity in your process. So it's all a part of the process. Don't become bitter. Don't be bitter. It's part of the process. Be encouraged. Allow the process to encourage you and motivate you that, you know what, I'm going to finish this. I'm going to finish. So listen, be encouraged. This is my brief inspirational moment. Just wanted to share something. Those who are jumping on, definitely subscribe. I share a lot of inspirational, encouraging, uplifting, illuminating, revelatory type things on my channel. Sometimes I do basketball. I show basketball skills, and I talk about credit. I talk about money. I talk about investing. I talk about a lot of different things. For those of you that are even tuning in, I thought I could have shared my book, but I have two books that I have written, and they're on Amazon Kindle. So if you look at my name, Justin Burnette Sr., you'll see two of my books. One is Kingdom Stewardship, and one is Strategic Fasting and Praying. You can purchase both of those on Amazon Kindle. Feel free to do that since some of you are still on. And I think both of those books will be a blessing to you, especially Kingdom Stewardship, because I'm actually in the process of doing a stewardship training or stewardship session this coming Thursday. I won't be on YouTube Live, but I'm going to do talk about stewardship and how it changed my life. I'm actually going to do in a in-person session, talk about finances and talk about investing and talk about how to build your credit and how to start business credit and all that kind of good stuff. So listen, thank you for tuning in. I pray that what I shared and talked about is encouraging. Just want to talk about the process. Listen, this is part of the process. Don't be bitter. Don't be envy. Don't allow unforgiveness to set on your heart. Listen, learn how to forgive. Keep moving. Keep plowing. It's part of the process. All right. So listen, be encouraged. God bless. Tune in next time. And the one young man, thank you for sharing your comments. Greatly appreciate it. Definitely encourage you to subscribe.